Hi, I'm Melissa Reader. Welcome to Agehood. It's the podcast for people who are quietly carrying it all. Aging parents, adult kids, work, life, and their own next chapter. If this is sounding like you, well, you are in your agehood, and it's time we talked about it. Kate Carnell has worn many hats, originally as a pharmacist, right through to Chief Minister of the ACT, business ombudsman, mental health advocate, and now chair of Violet, the organisation behind this very podcast. But what makes Kate's voice so compelling isn't just her impressive CV, it's the fact that she's really lived the complexity that we're here to talk about. From standing at the pharmacy counter helping families as they care for elderly loved ones or people who are unwell, to sitting around the kitchen table with her own ageing parents. Parents who were really clear about their wishes but whose plans still came unstuck. Kate knows that end-of-life planning isn't just policy or medicine, it's relationships, timing, emotion, trust, and often hard conversations that are left too late. On today's episode of Agehood, Kate joins me to talk about how important it is to get these conversations right and why she believes we need to shift the way we think about the final chapters of life. Kate, welcome to Agehood.
Thank you very much for having me, Melissa.
We have lots of conversations, don't we? As chair and CEO of Violet, we talk pretty regularly about a range of things, but I think today's conversation is a little different, and I've really been looking forward to doing this with you.
Thank you very much.
You are the chair of Violet, the organisation behind this podcast, but you've had a really rich and varied career, from politics to ombudsman's roles and a lot of things in between. Tell us a little bit about the things you've been involved in.
Well, Melissa, first and foremost, I'm a pharmacist. So I've been involved in health for a very long time, and I owned my own pharmacies for a lot of years, 15 years or so. And one thing you learn in pharmacy is you get quite close to your customers, to your patients, and see what they're going through. And that really changed my views on a whole range of things that I got involved with over time, everything from drug law reform to what we're talking about today, end-of-life planning and care. Because the thing about pharmacy is you'll be dealing with two customers, two clients, mum and dad, they're getting older, then one of them can't come in anymore, and then the daughter comes in, and you see the whole process.
At the front line.
Right at the front line,
Yeah.
right at, hi, Mrs. Jones, how's, whatever, how's your husband?
And long-held relationships too, aren't
they
they?
are.
They're people you know.
And you can see them, can see what happens when people get very frail, and particularly when plans haven't been put in place to make that end-of-life approach the best it can be. So from then I went into politics and was Chief Minister of the ACT for a couple of terms, and I'm probably one of the very few people who ever gave themselves the health portfolio, but then I gave myself Treasury as well so I could pay for
Helpful combination.
A helpful combination, that's fine. And so since then I was CEO of the General Practice Network, the divisions of general practice. So and then small business ombudsman, the small business and family enterprise ombudsman, which was about looking after smaller businesses, which is the majority of Australian businesses, and how they interface with our society and with our economy, really. And a lot of those family businesses, are part of that succession planning. Again, coming back to the issue we're talking about today, how you deal with situations where, mum and dad have run the business for a very long time. They're getting older. The kids there needs to be succession planning in the business, and that means having discussions and having plans. So it's not just about death and dying, it's about that whole economic scenario of planning properly.
Through different chapters of life.
Through different chapters of life.
And you have also been quite instrumental in the kind of formative years of Beyond Blue, right through to its kind of development and state now. Tell me a little bit about that, because we often point to mental health as a bit of a North Star for the work we're doing here, and that it had all the similar stigma, rather, not so long ago.
That's true. So I got involved with Beyond Blue right at the beginning of Beyond Blue, really. As I said, I was in politics. I was Minister for Health and also Chief Minister. And having seen in pharmacy the huge issues that mental health produced in our society in a whole range of different areas, and I'm not going to go into them now, but for Beyond Blue, I was at the Premier's Conference meeting, or COAG as we called it, where Jeff Kennett got up at the end of the meeting and said, look, we've got to do something about mental health. Now, this was head of government meeting, not health minister's meeting. So they're all looking at him and saying, Jeff's lost the plot this time.
When was this? What year was this, roughly?
This was back in probably 1999, I think. It was while Jeff was still Premier.
Yeah.
He lost the election very soon after this. And what had happened is a couple of one of his daughter's friends had died as a result of suicide. And his daughter had thought they were car accidents and said, Dad, you've got to do something about road safety. Jeff asked for some work to be done on what had happened with these very impressive young men, he said, and it turned out to be suicide and mental health. Jeff then stood up in front of COAG and said, look, we just got to do something here. He convinced John Howard at the time to put some money on the table. As Premier of Victoria, he matched and actually gave a bit more at that stage, and then put pressure on others to put some money on the table. It was very small back in those days, but when Jeff lost the election, he went ahead and set up Beyond Blue. It was lucky Victoria kept the money on the table even after Jeff wasn't there. And Beyond Blue started in a very small way to start with. But what we were trying to do is make it okay for people to talk about it. You can't fix something you can't talk about.
What's so interesting in that for me is the kind of misperception of the problem as being a road safety issue, when actually you deeply look at the problem and you realised it was an issue around mental health. And I think there's some parallels for us in this work as well, because last stage of life, end of life, has so commonly been seen as a medical issue. And what we're learning and now very much committed to is this is actually not about medicine. This is about people, relationships, conversations and planning. So, I think there's a lot that we can learn from those formative years of Beyond Blue. I know it wasn't easy getting that off the ground, but look at where that organisation is today, the impact it's had and the support it has from the community.
Look, it's absolutely true. So most of issues such as mental health are not just about medicine. Obviously, it is important to have psychologists, psychiatrists, the people who can medically support somebody, but a lot of it's about discussions, about accepting people for who they are, being willing to ask, are you okay, giving people support in the workplace, in families when they are struggling.
Yeah.
Not doing well.
Yeah.
So a lot of problems can be solved by having good, solid discussions, good planning and accepting that what people want and need.
So true. So tell me, when I came down to talk to you a couple of years back, we caught up in Canberra late one afternoon and I talked to you a little bit about this work and I asked you to please consider joining us. What was it that got you about Violet and this area?
Well, as I said, I'd been a pharmacist. Well, I'm still a pharmacist, really, but I'd been a pharmacist for a long time, and I'd seen, what happens to families when that end of life process, the last chapter of life, isn't handled well. But then I thought I knew everything, you see, because I'd been Minister for Health. I'd done inquiries for the federal government, a couple of them into aged care. It's a complex area, but hey, I knew what federal governments did and state governments did and what the private sector did. I understood all that. So I got to Mum and Dad.
Yeah.
And Mum and Dad were, Dad ran his own businesses for lots of years. They were capable people. They'd made it really clear that they didn't want to be saved, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
That they had the Philip Nitschke book on the shelf, talking about, if they ended up needing significant support, if they ended up not being able to look after themselves, they wanted to be allowed to die.
So they accepted their age and their increasing frailty, and they were quite open to what that was.
They were. So those discussions had. So I call them the what discussions. So they didn't want to end up in a fetal position in an aged care place. They didn't want to be saved if their quality of life was significantly impacted upon. So we knew all that. Mum and Dad had built a very nice granny flat. It was probably a bit better than that in the backyard of the old family home. We had railings. We had, wheelchair access. We were planned to within an inch of our lives. But what we didn't really plan for and hadn't had the discussions about was how we were going to achieve what Mum and Dad wanted, and that was to die in their own home.
And you mean how you were going to do that as a family, as a group of people?
Well, how we were going to do it as a family, but also the actual nuts and bolts of this.
Yeah.
Mum had help. We'd started the process of help coming in for, basic things like house cleaning, all of those things. And Mum really, really hated it because we were using some of the bigger operators and they sent different people all
and it's hard,
the time.
Isn't it? It's so hard for people when they have different people coming in and out. It's hard to avoid also, but it's hard for people to accept.
Well, Mum just hated having different people that she didn't know in her house. So she said, I'm not having, different people in my house anymore.
Can that?
How often do you hear the same thing from people saying, yep, that's exactly what my mother said. It's exactly what my father said. So what we didn't do then is have sensible discussions about, okay, Mum, get that, but, you are going to fall. Mum's 90 at this stage. She's quite frail. Dad's looking after Mum. She was going to fall, and guess what? She did.
She did, yeah.
Broke a hip, ends up in hospital. She's too frail for a hip replacement, so they pin it for pain purposes. Dad can no longer lift Mum. Now what do we do? Mum said she doesn't want people in the house. We haven't really, come up with a plan on how to get around that. I found a really nice residential aged care facility, because I knew the space. It was lovely. It looked a little bit like a resort. I got Mum and Dad in together, which is a challenge. I thought, okay, we've got this nailed. They hated it. They were depressed. Dad didn't have a job anymore because he couldn't look after Mum. They died within 28 days of each other.
Oh, gosh.
It was horrible. They didn't deserve that. They deserved better than that. But it was really because we had planned what, railings, that sort of stuff.
The kind of practical, tactical stuff.
But not how. So the inevitable nature of Mum falling, and ending up in a situation where Dad couldn't lift Mum, so couldn't take her to the loo and all those things, how we were actually going to deliver on what we knew they wanted was a really big, not surprise really, but a big, a failure from my behalf because we hadn't done that.
Oh, that's so hard, Kate. And I guess, for you in your political roles and your leadership roles, knowing the system is one thing, living the system as that classic sandwich generation scenario, it's really different.
It's really different. And, really having in-depth discussions as a family. And that's the other bit. I only got one brother, so it's not like we've got thousands of us.
Are you the eldest?
I'm the eldest.
So you're the eldest daughter?
The classic.
Yes, the classic eldest daughter, yes.
And my brother lives in the house, in the old family house at the front. But, they're working and, whatever. The fact is we hadn't sat down and said, okay, how are we going to give mum and dad what we know they want, understanding what was going to happen. Mum was going to fall. Dad wasn't going to be able to actually physically look after mum anymore. I think if we'd said to them, look, you are going to need 24-hour care, and we could have managed that in the facility, where, but that means you're going to have people in your house, and you're going to have them, available 24/7, or residential aged care. Those are the choices here. I think they would have chosen residential aged care, at which stage it would have been their choice, at which stage I think, the level of depression and other things wouldn't have been there. Mind you, they might have chosen to stay at home, at which stage it was their choice to have the care. The problem was the decision-making ended up being not with them. And I think that's the issue we find all the time.
That's so painful, yeah.
People having to make decisions in hospital corridors because mum's fallen, dad's fallen, something's happened.
We haven't talked about this. We haven't planned for it as a
And
family, and here we are, and we've got to make some fast decisions. When you think back about that time, do you sense that you knew that was a conversation that you needed to have, or was it just not part? Were you just kind of getting through day to day?
Oh, look, back, mum's in hospital. She's not real well. Dad's pretty distressed, as you could imagine. It wasn't a good time to have, an in-depth discussion. The only discussion we could have is, okay, mum can't come home.
What do we do?
What do we do? And Dad said, I can look after her, but Dad couldn't look after her. And, so it was in those sort of situations, it's a really bad time to have rational discussions.
It's practically impossible.
You've got to have them earlier.
Yeah,
And that's what Violet's about.
Absolutely. Given all of your professional work and that very, difficult personal experience, why do you think this is so hard for people?
I think, unfortunately, in our society, talking about death and dying is really difficult. How often do you hear, oh, such and such passed on? Well, they actually just died, really. And so talking about death, even though it happens to everybody, which is, we're all going to die. We all have, I expect, views on how we would like to die. We all have, sort of very unrealistic views. Like I'll say, I'd just like to be run over by a bus, here 1 minute, gone the next.
Not off in my sleep.
Not off in my sleep. I was thinking run over by a bus is bad because of the poor bus driver.
That sounds a little traumatic, I have to say, yes.
But
I think you mean quick.
I want quick, here 1 minute, gone the next.
Yeah.
But that's not terribly likely.
No.
For most people.
For 60 or 70% of us, that's not going to be the case.
So the thought that we could be here 1 minute, gone the next is very, very unlikely, and sometimes not the best outcome, because that process of dying, where you can have discussions with your family, with your friends, you can be you can do a whole range of things that you may not have done otherwise, particularly with your very close family.
Yeah. And the grief process for your family.
Yeah, you can handle much better
different.
if you can.
Of course.
If it's not here 1 minute, gone the next.
Coming up, Kate on why early conversations about care really matter and how you can make that happen. Agehood is brought to you by Wellway's Carer Gateway. Caring for a loved one can be hard, but you don't have to do it alone. Wellway's Carer Gateway provide free, tailored support for carers. call 1800 422 737 or simply search Wellways Carer Gateway to start your Carer Gateway journey. We do so much for so many other life stages, don't we? And I'm not naively ignoring the fact that when people are pregnant and have babies, there's a beautiful baby that is the result of the plan. Yeah. But we do lean into so many life stages. We know how to talk about them. We can support each other and we can access services. Mm-hmm. But this whole chapter of life is just a void.
Well, the problem is it becomes medicalised. So what happens is it's about medicine. It's about, you hope, palliative care is fantastic, but generally people don't even access palliative care until the last days of life, or when it's really about pain relief, keeping a patient or a person comfortable rather than, the whole issue of dying over a period of time. So we medicalise it, we make it about doctors, not about families, not about discussions, not about planning, all the things that you would normally do for a stage of life.
So much work to do, particularly when we think about this in the context of an ageing population. And we've talked a lot about this on this podcast, but we have a 5-fold increase in the number of people reaching 85 by 2031. So, Kate, we've been flooded with submissions from the sandwich generation in a recent campaign talking about how complex this is for people, that most people don't even know where to start. And yet we're only at the very beginning of that demographic shift. So, it's worrying what this could look like in 4, 5, 6 years' time.
Well, Melissa, having been around health for a long time, the fact that 25% of beds in our public hospital system are taken up by people in the final stage of life, and that's really people like my mum back in the day with nowhere for them to go, and getting treatment that is not useful. I mean, they're dying. They're going to die.
And that's not the place for them to be in those last stages of life. That's not where they want to be, not where their families want them to be.
Look, hospitals are there to treat people, to make them better. They're not there as a comfortable, quiet, embracing sort of an
familiar
environment where for people to have their final, parts of their life. And, we're not talking necessarily about days. We know that people are in hospital, for regular admissions to hospital for quite long periods of time in that final 12 months of life.
It's about 33 days, isn't it? On average, over 4 episodes. That's a lot of time when time is the most precious thing.
And that's the average. There's lots that are there for lots longer. And, these are taking up hospital beds that are desperately needed to treat people and make people better. We hear about ambulance ramping and whatever. This is not to suggest we want to throw people in final stage of life out, but we want them to be where it's best for them and their families. And that means we've got to have discussions and plan it before they end up, in a hospital bed with no plans, no residential aged care, no capacity to go home or to another family member or whatever it is that family actually wants.
Which is just that constant story of doing too little too late. I think that's exactly what we're trying to address.
It's also true, Melissa, when you talk about the sandwich generation, that's changed dramatically. Now 58-year-old women, which is the average in this space, are still in the workforce.
I wanted to ask you about this because this is really silent, isn't it? And it's huge. Yeah. Let's talk about that average 58-year-old woman. What is she grappling with and managing day to day?
Well, what's changed dramatically is back in my mum's generation, they weren't at work. They might work a bit, but mostly they weren't at work. Mostly people died a lot sooner. So parents didn't live till, 90, 91 like my parents did. And mostly kids had left.
Yeah.
Now, increasingly, the 58-year-old woman is in the workforce, working full-time, and we need her to for productivity purposes.
Well, yes, absolutely.
So as a society, we need those women, well-educated women in the workforce, needing to continue to work for their retirement, but also for our community more broadly, or for our economy more broadly. She's potentially got kids still at home because they can't afford to buy a house yet, so they're living at home to save on rent and all those things that we hear about all the time, and have got elderly parents that are alive, potentially living in their own homes, becoming frailer. So trying to balance all of those things while working full time is incredibly difficult. And I'd have to say, I made the point earlier that I understood the aged care system. The aged care system is an absolute nightmare to navigate. It's really complex. So for people who've never interfaced with it before, it's, it's really, really hard. I always despair for people who English may not be their first language and may not understand the Australian health system or legal system. It must be impossible.
They're doing this at a point in time where there's huge stress. Something's happened to trigger that entry to residential care. So it's a period of huge stress. The thing that's really on my mind when you look at occupancy in residential care, it's quite hard to get a bed today. Yep. Again, what is that going to look like in 5 years' time? And what does that mean again for that 58-year-old woman who, you assume whose parents or in-laws would want to be home, would want to age in place for as long as they can, and it's very hard to access services and support in a timely way. And that 58-year-old woman is juggling everything then in a much more acute way.
Look, it's really hard, and especially if you actually don't understand the system, don't even know where to go for help or support, because there is home-based care. You've got to have an assessment to determine what level of care, and then you've got to access various other services. It is actually quite complex even to access the services that exist and even know they exist. That's a problem with the system as we've got it today. Where do you go to actually even know what questions to ask, how to have that conversation with mum, what services are actually available? In other words, where do I start?
Where do I start? And that's the question we've just heard over and over and over again from thousands of people, isn't it, in the last couple of years. You've just done a beautiful segue for me there, thank you, into what does this look like if it's done better? And I'm not pretending we can wave a magic wand and make this stage of life easy, because it's not. It's a difficult, challenging stage of life. There's a lot of emotion. There's a lot of anticipatory grief, and, sometimes that family stuff, those emotional dynamics, they all come up, right, when things get messy. But if we thought about the things that need to be talked about and in place for this stage of life to be done better, I'd love to work out a bit of a checklist with you.
I think a checklist is really important. But look, the first thing on a checklist is to talk to mum or dad or whoever it is that is at in their final chapter of life about what they want. Secondarily, what the family wants and can do, what's possible for the family. So I suppose we could say identifying what truly matters to the person who is in that final chapter, but also what really matters for the family. And that will differ quite significantly depending on
a whole range of things.
A whole range.
And everybody knows that, those elements.
So you've got to have the conversation not in a hospital corridor.
Yeah. Catherine Mannix, who does a lot of work with us, often talks about that conversation needing to be an invitation, which might mean that you actually have to make that invitation quite a few times before that person feels ready. But if that feels like a demand, it's hard for people. So I think there's a lot of resources and advice that we've put together at violet.org.au about these conversations for anyone listening that might want to look at those. But the thing that's really stayed with me is this idea of an invitation. What about decision making? Because we need to understand how we want to share health information, how we want to make decisions, and also if we are not able to make decisions for ourselves, who would do that on our behalf? Who would speak for us?
Well, one of the important things I think for Violet in this space is to become a source of truth a bit, as I'm sure we will talk about. But Violet has great information on the website with the capacity to ask questions at 11 o'clock at night, which is probably when you need to ask those questions.
When you can catch your breath.
Catch your breath.
Actually do
but
that.
We've also got Violet Guides, and Violet Guides are people who have been there. They've been through losing a loved one. They're very well trained by us at Violet on how to have those conversations, but also on how to support somebody through that decision-making process, because family dynamics are difficult. Look, let's be fair. And where things go really wrong, as we know from our absolutely wonderful board and clinical advisory group, who are often doctors in accident and emergency, in intensive care. So the great dilemma is, one member of the family says, yes, mum doesn't want, the life support system on. She wants it off. She's made it clear. And another member of the family says, no, you can't do that. So
they might have just flown in from another state and maybe not seen mum for 2 years and might not be at the same point of acceptance.
Making sure you've navigated those family dynamics early, not when you're in hospital, is pretty fundamental, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And the guides are so good in that space. As you said, they've all got lived experience. They're incredibly well trained and supported to deliver those support programs for people that are caring for loved ones, but also for people through grief and loss and bereavement.
Yes.
And there's no finite line around that. Anticipatory grief can start quite early from a diagnosis or perhaps from a fall. So, they really are there to support people through the whole spectrum. And anybody interested in looking at that support program can have a look at violet.org.au. The other thing that is incredibly helpful for people, you've just referenced it, is what we call Ask Violet. And it's a digital companion that we've developed drawing on all the wisdom and data and learnings of working with a Violet Guide. So you can now talk with Violet at 11 or 12 o'clock at night and she can talk to you in any language. So I would really encourage everybody to jump on and have a look at that. She's very, very well trained and may just have the answers and the support that you're looking for in the time frame that you need it. Let's go back to the checklist because this is also one of the products that we're providing through Violet. We call it the Violet Plan. It's a series of reflections that helps you develop things like a care compass for your loved ones' future care and well-being, and it also starts to assist you with financial, legal and life matters, memory and legacy and a range of other things. But let's stay in the space of kind of care at the moment. We've talked a little bit about that decision-making and planning for uncertainty, but there are also some really key decisions here around the type of care people want and the type of care they don't want.
And being really clear about that and making sure families are really clear about that. The example I gave before of one member of the family saying, I know mum doesn't want to be on that life support system, and another one saying, no, it's really bad. You can't pull the plug. That's at a extreme end of this, but that happens all the time. So making sure that families are understanding and have had the discussions about if this happens, what's the outcome? And remember, the hard bit about this is you don't know what day you're going to die or what day mum's going to die or even what month mum's going to die. So this there is a huge amount of uncertainty. So a lot of planning is about saying, okay, we're going to have a baby and this is the date, or within a week or two it's going to happen. In this case, you can't. So it could be a year, it could be months, it could be years, it could be a number of years. You just don't know, but you know it's going to happen. So I think the important bit is just to be really, really honest in those discussions, to say, look, Mum, we're all going to die. You're going to more than likely die before me because you're older, you're getting frailer. Let's have that discussion about what that's going to look like. Not about, oh, Mum, you're going to die. No, it's about we all are.
Yeah.
And we should have those discussions before we get to the final stage of life.
Well before. Again, that's something we're really continuing to advocate for. There's a lot of relief, actually. I think, people are very apprehensive sometimes about having these discussions or making somebody upset or uncomfortable. And, I acknowledge that they're not easy to open, but done well and respectfully, there's often so much relief, isn't there, that finally things are out in the open. We've said some important words to each other. It may be a conversation that we have to return to, and no doubt we will.
And often the reality is it doesn't happen in one conversation.
Yeah, things change. Mm-hmm. Things change. But we know how to do it now. We've had a bit of practice. It's something we can return to. What about this idea of sad men? All of that administration that is so time and cost heavy, but also heartache heavy, all the financial and legal stuff and the life admin lists that seem to go on forever. I don't think there's an easy fix to that. But again, when you look at the fact that only 11% of people have a power of attorney and only 40% of people have a will, there's so much that we could do in that space to make things easier as well.
Look, absolutely. In fact, huge amounts. So having a power of attorney, everyone should have one, because you don't know what will happen in life, really. You could have a car accident and not be competent. One of the saddest things at the moment is, the levels of dementia are going up quite significantly. And the problem is it isn't legally possible to have a power of attorney when somebody doesn't have the capacity to make the call. So you can't get somebody with significant dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever, to actually sign a power of attorney, because the lawyer stroke doctor, both of them, need to be able to say this person knows what they're signing.
Yeah.
And putting it off for a long time often means you get to a point where you can't do it anymore. It's not possible. So power of attorneys are really important. Obviously, wills are really important, and obviously it's really important to update your will as your life situation changes, as your kids get older, as things happen. We all should do that. But importantly, things like, where are all of those documents that your loved ones are going to need when you die? And so just as simple
Everyone's got a dusty top drawer, haven't they, or a box stuck at the back of the wardrobe.
It's good if it's only one box.
Yes. Or, in something, as opposed to just, randomly set through the house. But, we have to do that better. And I think there are so many ways that these two things can come together, because we're talking about key people in our lives and our families that we hope will, accompany their loved ones, their parents, their partners, will help make decisions together, whether that's around health or care or legal or financial matters. So they're all part of the same conversation around planning for this life stage.
And being able to know the things you've got to ask for, like a whole range of people are going to ask you for the death certificate. So make sure you ask for one. There's stuff that you don't even think about. And that's, again, where some of the planning that Violet can help you with can mean when it happens, and remember, it's going to happen to everyone, when that loved one dies, well, I need this, and this. I need to know where they are, and I need to be, to know the things that I need to do, like closing down bank accounts or
It also means
whatever.
that all of those processes with banks or super funds or insurance companies are so much easier because you've got the documents you need. There's just a lot less distress and less disorganisation. I don't know if you found this, Kate, but I remember after Mara's death, I had to put that death certificate on the counter in front of so many strangers and just watch their face, like watch their reaction.
Yeah.
And it was awful. It felt so disrespectful to him. It just felt horrible all around. So one of the things that we are really trying to do is collect those documents and keep them safely, securely on the cloud for you so they can go to your insurer or your bank or wherever they need to go and you don't have to have that very painful experience.
And of course, Violet has also helped with training people who deal with this, at the banks, at the residential aged care. We'd like more of those entities to train their staff, but it's really important to have staff that understand the trauma.
It's hard for them too. It's hard for those staff as well. They are not equipped with the skills to talk about this. They can sense the pain in the conversation, but they don't always have the skills and they don't have the third-party partners to point those customers and members towards.
We can help train them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Kate, that's been brilliant. I think we've covered a lot, but I want to ask you one last thing. Thinking about that 58-year-old woman, that sandwich generation woman, what are some words of wisdom?
Look, I think the real, well, for me, the most important issue is to be realistic. Mum and dad are going to die. They're going to become less able to look after themselves. And what does that look like? And how do we have the conversations now with them and with the family more broadly to ensure that final stage, that final chapter of life is the one they choose and that you as a family are able to support? I mean, sometimes people want things that are not possible, but often they are possible if you have the time and the capacity to have those discussions. And Violet can really help with what those questions are, what things you need to think about, and take that weight off your shoulder of not knowing where to start.
Feeling alone and feeling so overwhelmed.
And yet there is a huge number of Australians right now, often women, mostly women, but not always women, who are in exactly that space, feeling like the weight of the world's on their shoulders. They've got balls in the air, mum, dad, kids, job, at the moment, financial pressure, cost of living, all sorts of things, and feeling like they're just being pushed into the ground because, too much weight on their shoulders. Hopefully, Violet can help take some of that weight off.
Fantastic. Kate, Carnell, thank you. This organisation would not be what it is without your incredible support, support for me, support for the organisation and everything we do, and your commitment. And thank you for taking the time for this chat.
It's an absolute pleasure, Melissa.
Thank you. Here at Violet, we believe that the last stage of life deserves the same care, planning and attention as every other life milestone. That's why we offer free support, guidance and tools for families so that no one has to face this chapter of life feeling unprepared or unsupported. If you'd like help making a plan, starting an important conversation or simply feeling less overwhelmed, head to violet.org.au to learn more. And if this episode helped you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it too. We'd love you to follow Agehood and leave us a review. This episode of Agehood was brought to you by Wellways Carer Gateway. As a carer, prioritising yourself and your own well-being can be hard. That's why Wellways Carer Gateway is making it easier with walk-in carer hubs, simple online registration and Wander, a mobile service, bringing support to carers in their own communities. Help is now more accessible than ever. Whether you're looking for practical advice, emotional support or some help navigating other support systems, Wellways Carer Gateway can help. Call 1800 422 737 or search Wellways Carer Gateway. Today's episode of Agehood was brought to you by Bill Will. Wills aren't designed to cover the full picture, especially when it comes to personal, practical and financial details. A letter of wishes from Bill Will really helps to fill that gap. From passwords and accounts to everyday instructions, it can save hundreds of hours of admin for the people that you care about most. Reduce stress, share your values and preserve your voice at billwill.com.au.